All right, I will call the meeting to order. It's 5:31. I would like to begin by acknowledging the treaty territory, the Anishinaabe, which is defined within the pre-Confederation Treaty, now known as the London Township Treaty of 1796. Throughout time, this region has also become the current home of the Haudenosaunee and Lenni-Lenape nations. Completing and accepting the agenda. I assume everybody's had a chance to review that. Can I get someone to move that? Moved by Shelley, seconded by Colin. Thank you very much. All in favor? The agenda is accepted. Any disclosures of pecuniary interests? There being none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was December 15 of 2022. I'm going to assume again, we've had a chance to review that. Is someone prepared to move acceptance? Shelley, Deputy Mayor Lewis, all those in favor? It's done. There are no communications that I'm aware of, no delegations, no presentations. My understanding is that we only will have to go in camera if the discussion moves to an area on any of the matters that we need to. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So we'll go right to the consent agenda. First, we'll go to the staff report, and I'll ask for a mover and seconder, and then we'll get the report started. We're just receiving. Someone move receipt. John, thank you. Seconded by Shelley. Not Shelley. Oh, my goodness. Help me. Tammy, I apologize. It happens to me, believe me.
It's okay.
Sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. And through the chair, just a quick overview on the CEO report. Community safety continues to be a challenge across most of our communities. We are meeting regularly internally, trying to adjust our contracted services and our direct staff, and working through sort of the evolving environment that usually happens every winter, where the unhoused are making space in our house, in our buildings, and we have extra guest traffic in our building. So just there, in addition to sort of working with the existing contracted services and sort of figuring how we can further sort of improve the safety at our building by just what we call hardening the asset, just changing out the locks, changing out the cameras, changing out, locking off certain areas of the building. I've had 2 meetings with the London Police, first with the chief, and then secondly with one of the staff sergeants in charge of the community outreach. So our objective of meeting with the London Police is really threefold. One, to bring them in to start doing community safety engagement with our tenants. Tenants have, through our town halls, raised the issue of response from the London Police as an issue. They've raised the issue of the unhoused in their buildings, and our own response to community safety is something they want to talk about in a focused meeting. So we're going to try to get a few of those meetings set up for this in the coming weeks and just start that process. We've had a strong relationship in the past on this, but it went away over the last few years as everybody adjusted to COVID. The second thing we want to do is have a better coordinated response to our high traffic sites. For us, that's 580 Dundas, 41 Simcoe, 345 and 349 Warncliffe. Just to increase the presence, see if we can coordinate some activity to get a presence of the police on site in a proactive way. That impacts how the unhoused and guests that may not want to interact with the police will come to the site. So it sort of acts as a little bit of a deterrent. It shows the tenants that the police are there to support them, and it helps our staff deal with the issues. So that's the second thrust that we're setting up. And the third is really to work to coordinate our community safety team and how we work in the community with the London Police Service. There's a few areas that we think we can coordinate better. Just on simple things, when we arrest people, we have to wait for the police to come to release them, so we can maybe smooth over that process, as well as dealing with some of the problem individuals in some of our sites. We have people that will wreak havoc in our sites for a few weeks at a time, even if they're arrested, trespassed, and go through the process. So how could we disrupt that cycle sooner, because it becomes really problematic for the tenants? So Lots of work going on there, and we're still adjusting every day on community safety. I think the other thing just to raise, as we did at our workshop a few weeks ago, we are part of the working through the multi-year budget process. So I've outlined the different areas that we're sort of looking to make investments to respond to what we heard in the town halls, and our staff meetings. And you know, they're outlined in the report, so I won't go over them. The only one I did not include in this by my omission was we requested capital funding to move to phase 2 of the Southdale project. So that was in the last revision of the multi-year budget that we put in for. So we want to put it on the table and have those discussions and see how we can make that phase 2 move forward. I think for the CEO update, that's the highlights. You had the report, so happy to have any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions?
I had one, if you don't
Go
mind,
ahead, John.
through
Go
you,
ahead.
Chair. Well, are we paying for police to have a presence in the building, or how is that being organized? Is that through Gary's group that's working on that, or what's happening there?
It is really, we used to have a strong relationship with London Police and their core unit. And the core unit was just, you know, a community-oriented response unit, and that was disbanded with COVID and staffing issues and sort of what they went through. So that would be normally who we work with, and as that hopefully gets reinstated, we'll work with them. But it's primarily the foot patrol, and so specifically our 580 Dundas site is right across from the police station. So this simple act of foot patrol walking through our building at the beginning of each shift would do a lot. So the 580 Dundas is foot patrol, and our other sites, it's just a little bit, it probably having some patrol folks drop by. So it's just really a site-by-site basis, not a paid police response, but really trying to coordinate and get them engaged, re-engage them on it. Because in the communities, they're just with their staffing levels and their community safety issues, we just haven't had that opportunity, so we want to build that back up. Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, it does. I guess I just wonder something proactively we can do to resolve these issues rather than have police resources that are tied up in this instead of other things in the community. Like, I'm sure that they're already inundated with like a whole bunch of other stuff. I just don't know if this is a feasible long-term solution to what's happening right now. So I guess it's just something to think about.
Yeah, and through the chair, I think that's a fair, it's not a long-term solution, but we need a timely and quick response to this. The long-term solution is increasing shelter space, street outreach, supportive and transitional housing options, and those things for those folks experiencing homelessness. But what we experience in our buildings on a daily basis is unhoused folks that will not leave, that we experience a high number of weapons that our staff are seeing, they're being threatened, and it's just we need to respond to what's happening as a safety perspective as we build out the long-term approach. So it's sort of seen as this is the measure that's required, and the ultimate goal is that we don't we do develop some models that don't require this so much in the long term. And this is not unusual. It's not unique to London, Middlesex community housing. It's within London, but it's also same in Toronto, same in other major centers. So it's just, we're dealing with a shift in the impact of homelessness across the communities.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I appreciate that. That's thorough. I mean, I think maybe we can coordinate with the city and some of the frontline supports and London Cares and whatnot to try to work together cooperatively on providing some type of guidance and trying to engage with some of those who are open to engagement or encouraging that, because ideally we help those people as well as keep the tenants safe. And clearly this is not a London Middlesex housing problem to tackle. And since the deputy mayor's in the room, I'll be sensitive with the way I word this, but yeah, I just think maybe we can be proactive in building partnerships on thinking about how to engage with those people that are there. Clearly they're desperate or they wouldn't be there. I mean, I don't choose to get up and go hang out in the hallways of London Middlesex housing properties for no reason. So just putting it out there on the floor for us all to think about.
Lucky for you, John, the deputy mayor is up next. So deputy mayor.
Yeah, I'm going to say I think there's real value in the police engaging in this right now. From their perspective as well, from some of the conversations I've had with senior leadership with London Police, the visible presence of them having come through our buildings a couple times will actually discourage proactively some of the behavior systems that we can't see as well. And I can tell you, and I shared one with Paul again today, counselors' email inboxes are getting filled with emails from tenants who are asking for this because they don't feel safe. And, you know, we as a housing corporation have to put the tenant safety ahead of the needs of those who are unhoused right now. And we don't have the ability to deal with the mental health issues and the addictions issues that some of these folks are facing. So as difficult as it is, and I mean, some of this too is our tenants providing access to people that they shouldn't be providing access to, which I know, and I see Shelley nodding too, but I know Paul's well aware of as well. So there needs to be some community engagement with our tenants by the police to help educate them on how to be proactive in protecting themselves. And that's the kind of work that the core unit used to do before it was dissolved. Hopefully, as we start to get those 26 officers onboarded later this year, that core unit's going to be reestablished. Hopefully some traffic enforcement as well, but that's not this board's problem. But that core unit getting reestablished is a priority because they can be proactive and they do engage with people in a different manner than they do when there's an active situation going on. I've spent half a day with the core unit pre-COVID, and I've seen how they interact with people, and it's much different than when a 911 call has gone in for a suspected weapons call or somebody who won't leave. So the sooner it's the core unit rather than foot patrol, the better, but foot patrol in the short term is definitely the way to go.
Thank you.
Chair,
Mayor Grant.
just Paul, chair to you. How are things in the county buildings? The interaction in any of the county buildings?
We, and through the chair, we did town halls in the county in December. So just 6 or 8 weeks ago, and we asked that question because it's a different tenant experience, right? The size of the buildings, their location, who we house is a different population. And they don't indicate that as a big of an issue, right? So the building, is 10 units or 20 units. So it doesn't have that same issue. They do experience some of the same challenges when there is a tenant that brings in a lot of guests. So that's really disruptive in a small building. So a new tenant will come in and they have guest traffic and things like that. So that really disrupts them. So it was more examples of that we heard of in the county. So it's really just getting on that individual tenant and the behaviors of the guests was the sort of response versus dealing with folks that had no connection to the building being in there.
And specifically in Strathroy, do you have the same interaction with the chief? Strathroy, have you had the opportunity to meet the chief in Strathroy?
I have not. We don't have the same issues, but it's sort of we should be having that connection. I'll
Make an
do
introduction.
that. Yeah, we have in Strathroy. We have I think our largest building is 40 some odd units.
Yeah.
So it's sort of it comes to a different scale, but it's still worth the conversation because they may know things that we don't know.
Thank you very much. Anything further? No, I just wanted to piggyback on what John said. I think police involvement is, as the chief once said to me, if a police officer comes to your door, it should be for something really important. Similarly, if a police officer is in our building, it should be for police work.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's what they're there for. So I just want to stay focused on our primary goal, which is our tenants and the safety of our tenants in our building. And frankly, people who are in our buildings and are not supposed to be there causing problems, they may need help. That may be 100% right. But I don't think we're the body that's going to provide help for someone who isn't a tenant in our building. That's the way I look at it. That's certainly our number one goal. So I'll leave it there. So if that's all we have on that interesting topic, it's been moved and seconded, so we just need a vote on that. All in favor, just receiving that report. Thank you very much. So the second staff report will be the vacancy management update report. I'll need a mover and seconder for that before we have discussion. Moved by Shelley, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Go ahead.
All right, just get the highlights in through the chair. Vacancy rate is at the end of December was 4.5%. Our target is 3%. We need to, through 2023, get down to 2%. So we are still running behind on the unit make ready. So let me just make sure. For December, we had 32 units made ready. And I know that in January, our number was around 38. So it's not before you. So our target is every month 30 just to maintain. So the conversation with the property services managers was to do the pushes. There is lots of activity happening right now. So we'll continue to try to get the 30 plus on an ongoing basis, with the target for the end of Q1 and into early Q2 to get down to the target number. We were running into issues at the end of last year with vendors. So we had a small vendor pool. They were swamped with the work and they weren't getting it done. So we brought in additional vendors and that has been successful. So they're now sort of more used to working our sites, and through that increased activity, we had minor issues and challenges with running out of flooring and minor things like that, we were going faster than we were used to going on some of the units. So that's working its way through. And one of the things that we're finding just right now, just working through, is working with the vendors on the units with asbestos containing materials. So just making sure they have the information to safely remove the material for that. And specifically, that's really flooring where we have tiles or mastic that contains that. And we just want to make sure that we're not rushing the units. We're sort of working with them on the safety measures for that. It is it's a minor kind of contamination, but it is something that needs to be managed. So that will slow up a couple of units for a week or two as we sort of make sure they do the safety protocols. But we're still pushing for 30 plus per month and have our mind on the target. So the make ready is about twice the number of units in that process that there should be. Just pleased to report that we're still moving those units when they are rent ready to leased and future leased in a very timely manner. So it's just really about increasing the flow to the tenant services team, and just always conscious that the tenant services team will get half of the units they get in a month. They'll get it in 2 days, on like the 27th and 28th of the month, as people are pushing for their targets and KPIs. So the numbers reported at the end of the month are really an over-report of the number of units that were available like a few days earlier. So they are doing well for that. So I think our challenge remains unit make ready. We have vendors that are doing the work. We have staff that are focused on it. We've offered overtime to staff just to do some of the minor things that we have to do ourselves versus the vendor, and they're taking us up on that. So we're confident we'll keep moving forward.
Well, before we go to questions, can you connect that number, that how many a month you need to do to hit the 4%, I think, vacancy rate? How do those numbers match up?
So we identified that we have between 360 and 400 units that turn over each year. So if we have a steady production of 30 units each month, that means that we got about 360 unit turns. So staff are that's in their mind. So every portfolio is at least turning 10 units. So if we're doing the volume we need each month of 30, we should be able to maintain a vacancy level. Right? So if you hit 25 one month because you had a whole bunch of bad vacancies or staff off, you got to hit 35 the next. So the challenge has been the consistency on the 30 and the ability. So when that happens, there's been no capacity to recover. So they sort of, okay, well, they fall behind and stay behind. So that's why you have a big push and you have a decrease in the numbers, and then summer vacation hits and they start creeping up, and then something else happens and something else happens. And then by the end of the year, your numbers are back up. So there's this cycle that you'll see annually. So that's what we're trying to work on, is to get that consistent capacity. And once we get down to a normalized volume, that becomes manageable. But if we're always at twice what we should be, we're not going to get ahead, and we can't afford to use vendors for all of those units all the time. So that's sort of trying to get that, build the capacity to do 30 plus each month is the objective.
Great, thanks. I just want to clarify that. Deputy Mayor, you got a
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly touch on the 16 units reserved for the Reimagined Southdale project. Are those, have those tenants moved in to occupy those? I know we have I think it was 18 units in total that we needed to transition away, so.
Yeah, so I just at the finance committee, I sort of identified that's the bad word. Just the wrong word. So we have 13 that are sort of been pulled out of service based on Reimagine. So there was 16 tenants have moved out, successfully relocated to other communities or within the Southdale community of their choosing. And then there was 2 others that that were at the time of this report not moved out, and there was active plans for both households. I just don't have the status of those. Now we're getting into sort of individualizing. So staff are working closely with both.
So I'm just wondering in terms of tracking our vacancy, I mean, we're gonna demolish these vacant units. They're not truly vacant. They're literally going to be gone and will not exist again until the building is complete. And that is going to, quite honestly, it's going to unfairly drag up our vacancy number.
So we do not include these units in our vacancy count because they can't be moved to rent ready. So
okay,
this section,
because they fell under the non-rentable, and the non-rentable is typically included.
is included
Okay,
out of that normal tracking, because we want to get in the vacancies. We also want to start tracking the number of days and getting better at make sure that the units are done within 30 days for certain classifications. So there's predictability there. So these units, the fire units, the CMHC accessible unit turns, and these units that are non-rentable are not included in the statistics you'll see in the past, in the back. But we just want to create some transparency on those units so that people know that they're not occupied.
good to know, because I was going to ask similarly with the CMHC, knowing we're doing 400 units total, that we're probably always going to see 6 or 8, whatever, as we start to build that cycle out.
Yeah, and what we're finishing for the CMHC units, just finishing sort of the first pilot units. So once we understand the flow of those, we'll develop a report that keeps track of the number of units on hold for CMHC, how long they're on hold, those types of things, so that there's transparency to that as well.
Thanks.
Shelley, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, the chair. My question is about the duration. And so first of all, I want to acknowledge that it looks like in December, you whacked off a ton of the 90+ day units. So that's great. There were a lot sort of hanging in that category. But you mentioned about wanting to be able to turn units in 30 days. And so this sort of drives my question back to your number, and the math makes sense about, 30 units a month, 30 in, 30 out, will maintain. So what is the plan to get us down to 30? Because that would require, let's say, 50 a month for the next X number of months.
Right, it's the use of vendors and to sort of instead of piecemealing flooring, kitchen, painting, it's doing the whole unit things and bundling them by site.
Mhm.
So, when you look at where the vacancies are, if there's vacancies at one of our buildings because the maintenance repair person is off and they're not getting to them. So that creates that lift in the vacancy unit. So if we go in and have 6 or 8 units done by a vendor,
Mhm.
they're working at the building, they do it very quickly because they're working with a big crew and going through a set process. So that's the plan, is to knock off those ones. We have other sites that, the flow through with the maintenance repair staff on staff and the type of the building and then the level of repair required,
Mhm.
they do a good job without the vendors, like some of the seniors buildings and things like that. But some of the adult buildings,
Right.
that's where you sort of get a little more damage, you get a little more wear and tear, and you need to bring the vendors in, or if you try to do it with staff, you will swamp them
Right.
because there's too much drywall repair, too much everything. So
Oh, okay.
that's the plan,
Yep,
to bundle it by building.
So is the strategy then to have them tackle the ones that have been sitting on the aging list the longest?
That was the strategy. I'm just re-engaging on the specifics of the targets. So I will be able to answer that at the next meeting.
Sure.
The other thing we've done is to make sure we're sort of managing that. Is we're targeting out 2 months now.
Okay.
So we're not just focused on what we need to do by January 31st, we're at February 28th, we're sort of. It's a rolling projection model versus I just got to get to the end of February,
Mhm.
which seemed to be happening last time. So now we're looking ahead. Because that way you're planning your vendor to get at those units and you're sort of doing that work. So we're just trying to get them moving forward. It is a daunting task.
Yeah.
To get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
So yes.
So one last question. We could talk about this all night. by
Yes,
the
we
way.
could.
No.
So my last question is in regards to our tenants' needs. And are the units on the aging list the most important units to be made ready? Like, is it more important that we get family units ready because we have families waiting for those units and that puts our sort of single units maybe less of a priority regardless of the fact that they've been hanging around longer, or is there any consideration in that regard?
Not at this time, but just our vacancy turnover. The way it's working is primarily in some seniors and adult buildings, so it's like and those are the tenants most impacted by the sort of delay. The family units, it sometimes need a lot of work, but the volume of turnover is lower in family units.
Okay.
It is sort of seen consistently. We did the numbers, I don't recall, so I will not make them up. But it is typically in a few seniors buildings, like the larger buildings
Mhm.
that have a steady turnover, and some of our adult buildings that we mentioned them, like our Dundas, Simcoe, Warncliffs, like those, they have a lot of turnover. So that's where that is. So the adult sites and then some select larger senior sites.
Thanks.
And did you want more information on that at a future meeting? Or
I have every confidence that you're taking our tenants into consideration. I mean, this is a complex strategy, right? There's many considerations.
Great. So I'm gonna go to John from San Francisco up there on the screen. You asked for that, John. You asked for it.
I did. I was in space. I figured I'd better change that one. Through you, Chair. I guess a couple of things, like, I'm gonna be very blunt here. I think it's a waste of time to be prioritizing any units in any of the buildings that have this frequent reoccurrence of extensive damage. They can wait. Those units can wait, in my opinion. That's just being very blunt. In regards to the strategy, I guess we could talk another time about what the strategy is and how we move like out of this. Because eventually percentages and stuff, there's lives, like, Shelley was just alluding to, there's lives, there's people here that are waiting for units, and I really want to focus on moving out of this. So I guess the question I have is, say, right, for example, I see in February 172 vacant units. So I'm thinking about so the rental income lost from those units in comparison to the cost to contract that work out to get those units ready, what would that be? Do we have any idea what that is? So I know we don't want to spend a ton of money contracting work out, but if we look at the amount of rental income that's being lost each month, does it make sense in some cases practically to pay contractors to prepare some of these units to get them ready to rent to families that are likely not going to get high on crystal meth and destroy them? So these are just that I don't know if you have any idea, and I don't expect you to answer on the spot right now. It's a question that came to mind I wanted to ask.
So I guess through the chair, I mean, the financial model for rent geared income housing is we receive about 50% of our income from the service manager for our operating budget, and about 50% tenant rent. So in some of the, you know, and based on that, where people's income source is, that determines their rent. So many folks in some of the sites that are high turnover adult sites, their income source is Ontario Works and ODSP, and that means in addition to what we get from the service manager per unit, we get about $85 or $139, depending on the site and the tenant, in addition to the rent. So, you know, the financial viability for a $5,000 unit turnaround, there'll never be a financial model that makes that work. So that's the challenge with that. You know, and for seniors, and families, the income generated from rent is much higher per unit based on their income source. So, you know, I think we're cautious that we don't look at that revenue loss compared to the cost to turn the unit, because a lot of times we just leave it vacant. And it's sort of, that would be the financially viable thing to do, but that's not our mandate. I get the idea of focusing on those units that will be less likely to end up higher damage, and it's sort of it's something to consider. We haven't really looked at that. I'll take that away, but yeah, it is a challenge because the adults, you know, and the adult buildings are typically, you know, the ones in the highest need of housing that we're experiencing. So we're at, you know, our mandate is to provide this housing in a good state of repair. So it's sort of maybe not the best financial model, but it is what we're funded to do. So that's, you know, that's the dilemma we face. So I think there's lots to think about in your statement, and you know, we'll reflect on that. Sort of, you know, we're gonna, as we get the numbers down and sort of do some analysis on the work we've been doing over the last few months on costs, we'll be able to sort of answer questions like that. But we're focused on just getting as many units back into service as we can. I think that's what's expected of us, and people understand that it's challenging, but we all want more our housing to be housing people versus sitting vacant.
John, any follow-up?
No, Phil, I think you want to get home before midnight tonight, so I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, through the chair. I was wondering if you could speak a bit more to, in terms of like our vendor process, like, is there any delay being experienced in terms of getting the units turned around on that front? Like, are we experiencing the capacity or cost issues? And I know maybe this isn't the right bring this up on, but in terms of getting creative with like getting the Fanshawe students, or like trying to figure out ways of reducing our cost, but, you know, increasing our capacity to be able to turn these units over. And I'm just curious if there's any issues with what you're saying.
Yeah. When we look, and through the chair, when we looked at who we were contracting with, what we're asking them to do and how they're charging us, yes, there was fundamental issues with how we're managing the vendors. And bringing the new vendors on to relieve the pressure and be more structured in the scope of work. The pricing and trying to be more competitive in that has shifted the landscape a little bit. We were overly dependent on a small number of vendors. And they were struggling with the amount of work we were giving them, but would never say no. And they were struggling with the same things we were struggling with, keeping their staff, dealing with all those things. So they were operating pretty much in the same world we were, where they'd say yes, but they weren't delivering on the timeliness. So by adding the new vendors and just shifting that landscape, we're seeing an improvement. And I think that's part of with the procurement manager on board, just continue to refine that. That's one of the reasons we're starting to track beat cost per unit and look at who is charging what for what work, what's the quality of work, and getting to that place. And that's sort of, I think, through the pandemic, the number of vendors available sort of changed, their capacity to serve changed. So we're just resetting that with the vendors. So over the next 3 months, we'll continue to sort of work with the vendors and sort of reshape how we work with them. And we're already seeing the impact. So it's something very positive. I think 3 or 4 new vendors on board who are doing great work.
Any follow-up?
No.
No. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Just for myself, I think what we are looking at is something that the board's very interested in. So I think what I'll do is talk to Paul about sort of having this as an enhanced agenda item, maybe at some point in time, to sort of go through some of the things that people feel they want to know, but may take a little longer at this table tonight to deal with, because I think that would be helpful to all of us. The other thing I think we have to remember is, I think we always feel this is a very important issue because it was the one that was the most important and probably the key to having the previous board sort of removed en masse, was a failure to do vacancy management and have that number down. So I think we're all sensitive to that. So I think that would be my approach, is maybe to have this as an item in discussion with Paul, that we can maybe bring back in a more enhanced manner. So that's great. So we've discussed that. I don't think there's anything else. So we just need a vote on that. All in favor of receiving that report? Thank you very much. So we'll go back to reports, number 11, which is reports in business. Staff report, the update on the selection process for tenant board director. Paul, if you could report initially on this, or to the chair, I really would like the chair of the committee to tell us about the process and how I don't, not to take anything away, but I think it was a really positive process. So I was hoping you could
For sure.
expand on that. So I'll turn it over to you.
So as we continue to refine the recruitment process, we added a series of interviews this time. So we received candidates' resumes from the clerk's office, used a scoring exercise to identify our top candidates, had the candidates in for, I wouldn't say an interview, but I would say a conversation to hear a little bit about their experience, how that might apply here, what, they did with their life, to try and have a really comfortable conversation with them, not in an intimidating kind of way. And so one of the things that I think the interview process brought to the overall selection process was the opportunity to hear a little bit more about how tenants with lived experience can bring a different perspective to some of our conversations. And so we had some great candidates, I would say all great candidates. And ultimately we were able to sort of hone in on a candidate, our recommendation to the clerk's office, who has both lived experience in our communities, in her personal life, as well as in professional life. And so should the city clerk appoint this person to our board, I'm really looking forward to working with her, because I think she
Talk to these two.
yeah.
Not putting pressure on you.
I was on the subcommittee. You don't need to talk to me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, a really strong candidate. So, so I think it was a great process. I think that it's a process that we should endeavor to pursue every time now, to get them into that conversation.
Paul, did you have anything to add to that? Maybe just in terms of where the process is and where it's going, rather than the.
No, I think I just first comment through the chair, just echo the sentiment. The director at the table, the process of doing the interview really added value to the process, and just sort of that is something we should continue. In terms of the process, the next step, if this report is approved, we draft a letter and send it to the city clerk's office tomorrow. And that will go to the SPPC committee and then city council through the next cycle. And once appointed by city council at the meeting, the candidate is notified and we can onboard them as a director. So it could, I think the only thing to be aware of is that we're making a recommendation. This decision is not binding on the city of London, so we just need to be aware of that. And they could make an alternate choice.
Thanks. Any comments or questions? From anyone? Just to echo, the one thing I was really, first of all, they were all good candidates. They all could have done the filled in the role. I think the one thing that was clear was we came to a consensus, which was really interesting to watch. You know, first we read resumes and then we met people and we came to a similar decision as to what we needed and the particular person. So I think we have a good choice, and I think hopefully they'll be as good as Tammy on the board. That's and I just got her name right, so she's going to be happy about that, I hope. But that's what we were looking for. We were looking for Tammy part 2, and I think we got that. So
No one is going to live up to Tammy.
oh, all right. So I need a motion and seconder to approve that recommendation. We'll let the chair of the committee, Shelley, move it. We'll let the deputy mayor second it. So he is now bound to vote a certain way at council. And I'll just call for a vote. All in favor? I still know a little bit of politics.
Hey, when you and I agree, I've learned that is definitely the
Yeah,
vote I want to
that's
make.
a
If
good
that doesn't
choice.
happen that
No,
often.
no, it
then-
doesn't. No, it doesn't. We will move on to staff report 11B, which is the 2023 board work plan. Paul?
What you have before you and through the chair is the draft board work plan for 2023, outlining the what's expected to come to the board and from which committees, just to give you an overview of what is on the agenda from a sort of governance and sort of required reporting perspective from the corporation. It's important to note that the board work plan is driven by the requests of board members based on issues they see, information they are receiving and not receiving, and they'd like to speak to at the board meeting. So we encourage the board members to work with us and identify those areas that they would like to see more information and get those on the agenda so that we can provide that information and sort of work that through the right committee. So please review, please let us know those things that you're hearing from the communities or your perspective that we should be bringing information forward on. There's things that come to the board then enter the public realm, and until that happens, they sit behind these office walls. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we have questions, I'll just get someone to move in second. Proving that report moved by Shelley, seconded by Mayor Grantham. And questions? Don't see any questions, so all in favor? Thank you very much for those reports. Next is the Finance Committee reports for information. So I'll turn things over to the chair, Ms. Chance, for just an introduction to those.
Sure. So as a finance committee, we met, I guess it was during the same time as we were doing our interview, so maybe about 10 days ago. Yeah, that's good. And there were a number of capital projects that were brought forward for our consideration. They are contained herein. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to look at them. The finance committee approved everything with no concerns and commented that we were specifically quite pleased to see the number of capital works projects moving forward at this early time of year. So they're getting out the door through the procurement process, and we'll have contractors in place, so we're not lagging at the end of the year as has been the case in the past. So great job.
Okay, so why don't we get a mover and seconder for the reports for information? Chair, you can move it. Seconder, John Corboy. So any questions? These are the reports 1 through 4, which are the information reports. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor? Thank you very much. So we'll move to the Finance Committee reports for board approval. And those are listed, there's several of them. They are, I think the chairs refer to them as capital matters. Any comments, Chair, on those items that isn't covered in your earlier comments?
Nothing further.
All right, so can we get a mover and seconder for those? The chair's gonna move it, seconded by Tammy Brooks. Any questions? There being none, all those in favor? So easy to spend money. All right, that is done. So we're gonna go to the Tenant Services Committee reports for, oh, sorry, did I miss something?
There is just a minor revision. The staff report number 2023-14, the balcony restoration, that is coming direct to the board.
All right,
It has not been reviewed by the finance committee.
all right,
Right.
So that is a indentation issue in your agenda. So we just want to pull that to a separate approval process.
okay, so I'm sorry, what's the item again? It's
Staff report L, which is at the end of the list,
Ah.
contractor award balcony restoration 202 McNay Street. That was not reviewed by the finance committee and we received permission
All
from
right.
the finance committee to bring right to board.
all right, so we did just approve it because I included it in, but you want it done separately, we can do that too. We can do it separately. Okay,
I
We
would
best
approve-
do it.
yeah, we'll do it separately.
Please.
So I'm gonna pull out of what we just approved, staff report L, which is the contractor award for balcony. It may, if it becomes an item that has to go somewhere else in terms of in camera, we'll do that, but for now, I'll just ask for a mover and seconder on that. Moved by Shelley, seconder, John Corboy. Any discussion or questions? There being none, all those in favor? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me. So we're gonna go to the Tenant Services Committee reports for information. I'll just turn things over to Committee Chair John for comments on those. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm sure everyone had a chance to review. I'm happy to answer questions. There's a lot of great work going on, engaging with the community. There's a lot of stuff that I wasn't even aware of that community members are leading. So tenants are leading some of this work. It seems we're engaging with seniors and people of all ages in a variety of activities. And it's pretty cool stuff. I mean, it's one of the rare times I don't have any concerns with anything. So happy to, they're doing a great job. And
right.
if anyone has any questions about any of it, I'm happy to.
Let's get it moved in second. Would you like to move it, Mr. Chair of the committee? Yeah.
Yes,
Moved by
please. Thank
John
you.
Corboy, any seconder, please? Counselor, oh, God. No, I know your name. It's just this happens to me.
You've been forgotten already.
Yeah,
You're through.
any questions or comments? Nobody can be offended when I forget their name because I do it to everybody. Any questions or comments?
Are we, Chair, are we talking about the Tenant Service Committee report, TS 23?
Yeah, we're putting them all together, so
Okay,
questions, comments?
well, just a comment, and
Go
I'm
ahead,
not sure of the
please.
appropriateness of it, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. At the bottom, we talk about the City of London official plan. My question would be, if it's appropriate, how does the county official plan work into it? I guess that's,
So the report you're speaking to is through the chairs TS 2305 reimagine
Yes.
Southdale.
you're right,
Yeah, so this was really specific to making sure the Reimagine Southdale project is aligned with the city of London and what they're
Right.
trying to accomplish. There, we haven't really been engaged in redevelopment conversations with
okay,
the Middlesex County, and
yep,
we are, having some of that conversation with the service manager, because there are some opportunities to sort of, how do we approach redevelopments in Middlesex County as it relates to the service manager and the funding relationship that exists outside of us. So I'm not sure how that exactly rolls out in terms of redevelopment and zoning, et cetera, with the county. But it is something on our consideration for our regeneration strategy that we need to develop. What is that relationship in the county at the municipal level.
Okay, and I'll apologize for the mistiming, but I was gonna ask that quite eventually anyways.
So no, it's we sort of regularly provide updates to people like the ministry on redevelopment plans, and this conversation came up. So it's definitely something that we talk about, but I just don't know the answer.
Okay.
I think just to add to that, I think it was more like what you explained. It's more of a jurisdictional thing, correct? Like it was just this, the county wouldn't have had any interest in that project, right?
Yeah.
Because it was within one. Okay.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
Any other questions, comments? All right, all those in favor? Thank you very much. That matter is passed. Moving on to new business, I just had two matters I wanted to raise. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming to the workshop that we did. I know some people couldn't make it, that's fine. I think it was really important work in terms of coming to really an idea of what we want to do is hopefully get the city to provide us with more ability to deal with the tenants in our own building in terms of being more involved in their process, because when you hear that 9 out of 10 of our tenants are coming to us and may not be ready to handle the housing we offer, I think that fits into everything we talk about all of the time in terms of people who are causing difficulties in our buildings, not of their own fault, but they just aren't able to handle that type of housing. So thank you. I think that's really good. And I think there was a real sense that we were speaking with one voice on that issue. And the other thing that I was really happy about with both members of council were very involved in that, have been very involved in that. If they want to chime in at this point, it would be great. Very helpful. And if they want to provide any update as to where we're getting on that and how they see that going, if one of you could speak to that, it'd be great.
I'll let Hadley start and then I'll.
This is Hadley, right? Yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
But some people call me Councillor Hadley, so my name is
figure it.
interchangeable.
All right.
So, yeah, I mean, from the conversation we had previously, like I agree, like I think there's a misconception, I think, in the public that 106 housing is going to be the solution to a lot of our housing issues. I really don't think that's the case. I think that from what we have discussed, we're just trying to get back on track, get these units up to snuff, be able to have a safe environment for the tenants. And I know, I imagine, I don't want to speak for Sean, but I think we're on the same page in that regard, that there are other projects I think that are better suited in terms of the supportive housing needs. And I'm in favor of seeing more of that. We haven't had a lot of developments other than just getting the budget passed, and that was good. At least we've got the money is in place now, which was nice to see. But I think in terms of future projects, there'll definitely be support from Sean and myself in terms of trying to relieve some of the pressure. I know when we spoke with Mr. Dickens, we talked about looking at the wait list was kind of our focus, because I know they brought that up, that that's something that we as the service provider do manage. And I think we were all in agreement that we definitely need to take a long, hard look at that and how to manage it. That triangle pyramid, whatever you want to call it, needs some reworking. And so I definitely think we'll see progress on that. I believe it's end of the month. Mr. Dickens is bringing something to us about date on review. So I think end of February.
So February 28th, we will get the draft around the housing and homelessness summit outcomes and the establishment of some of these low barrier community hub spaces and that sort of thing. I will say, I think we had a very good meeting with Mr. Dickens and Mr. Cooper to talk about the eligibility list for London Housing as well. And they have done an environmental scan of other municipalities. London Housing is being pushed to receive a lot higher acuity needs individuals than most housing providers across the province. And so basically it's a 10-item criteria that they use, and we're accepting people with 9 items on the list. Other municipalities are accepting 2. So we are getting a lot of individuals. I hate to say it in this language, but there's no easy way to say it. We're getting people dumped into housing who are not ready to be in housing. And we are not getting the supports brought in by service providers to support them. And they're not getting the supports out in the community either to maintain their housing stability. So that eligibility list has not been reviewed by the City of London in 17 years. So we have a commitment from Mr. Dickens to have a review completed and brought forward before the end of Q3 this year. We've asked him to make this a high priority item to get it dealt with, because we want people who are coming into housing with London Community Housing to London Middlesex Community Housing, sorry, Mayor, to be able to maintain that housing. Not to be in a position where 6 months later, we're dealing with an eviction process and a renovation of a unit so somebody else can have it. There was also an interesting discussion about the need, and this is not just for London Middlesex Community Housing, it's for our third-party housing providers as well. Some lobby and advocacy work is going to be happening with the provincial representatives about only currently taking 30% of the shelter allowance to apply to the rent. The shelter allowance should be the rent. If you're getting $390 for shelter, that should be the rent you're paying, whether it's to Odell Jelna or Homes Unlimited or London Community, Middlesex Community Housing. That should be the rent you're paying, because that is your shelter allowance. Now, there is no doubt that the social assistance rates for both OW and ODSP are not sufficient. But that's got to be addressed as part of that. That entire shelter allowance should be coming to the housing provider. We've got a lot of third-party providers out there who are coming to the end of their agreements because their mortgages are coming to the end of their life cycles. And these folks are going to be in no position to continue to provide RGI housing because they have no source of revenue to sustain themselves once the provincial dollars run out. So that was an important discussion point that we had with Mr. Dickens and Mr. Cooper as well. So just, this is really an aside, but I know people in the public, there's been this idea that if we just convert vacant office space to residential, that's the solution. A new unit right now built by the private sector in Southwestern Ontario is averaging about $350,000 for a unit. The conversion cost where this has been tried is almost $400,000. These buildings are just not set up for residential use. The plumbing, the electrical, all kinds of things have to be redone. And a lot of these are older buildings that have similar problems with, you know, asbestos tile or other things. So those remediation costs really jack up the price. Calgary has had some success with their subsidy program, though. They've added about, I think it was 700 units through conversion of downtown office spaces. However, a lot of that was before the inflation rates started to exceed 3, 4, 5, and now 6%. So there's a lot of conversation going on around that, but we certainly, from a housing perspective for London Middlesex Community Housing, it is those two pieces, that the shelter allowance has to be for shelter. And that if that means the provincial government has to increase other pieces of the social assistance programs, so be it. But that shelter allowance should not be backfilling basic needs and cost of living outside of housing, and that we need to review the eligibility criteria list so that we're taking people into housing that we as a housing provider can keep housed. So, yeah.
And further to, like, I think that's part of the with the report that will come out at the end of the month for the homeless and health summit, was partnering with those other organizations that are better suited for that, and trying to do some diversion and actually looking at that and saying, okay, like, which group of the community is better suited to handle this instead of having it diverted to us.
Sure.
Be interested to see what comes out.
Yeah, it's just new business, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Did you want to ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, so I'm interested in your comment about some of the other service providers moving away from the RGI model once they're eligible to do so. Is there a sense of how many units we're talking about and what the potential impact is on
Hundreds
the list? The list?
hundreds of units out there that they have no ability to sustain once the funding model expires.
So this is a freight train just coming at.
It is coming down the tracks at full speed. There ain't no light at the end of the tunnel because they haven't even turned on the light on the engine, so you can see the train coming down the tracks.
Let's
And
see how
we-
far we can go with this.
And when you get through the tunnel, the bridge is out and it's right off the side of the cliff. It is just in London alone, it is hundreds of units. Just between my ward and Councillor McAllister's ward, ballpark, you're talking in the range of 250 units in just 2 wards. Because there's some large townhouse complexes that are third-party social housing providers who, when the mortgage runs out, they don't know how they're going to sustain it as RGI.
And so should we expect as part of the strategy coming to the summit, the municipality have a plan to address it?
Well, the challenge for the municipality to address it is we've been waiting something like 18 months for the province to get back to these providers, and it's been crickets. So, I mean, the funding has never come through. I mean, we've had some funding arrangements with some of these providers, but it's primarily been the province where the funding model was created, and really, I've been diving into that and started to find out how much this was a model designed to fail since day one.
Hmm.
They never wanted to truly be in the housing based on the model they put together. They wanted to exit as soon as the mortgages were expired.
Now that's coming through first.
And here we are now with mortgages expiring, and those units are still needed, and there's no way to sustain them.
John, you had a point, or I don't want to get this into an extended discussion.
No. I'll talk to Sean privately later. I won't do it here.
Okay, great. I just wanted to keep that sort of at the top. Since we had the meeting, we talked about it. I knew there was further stuff, so I wanted to bring it back, and we can again bring it back when there's one of the council or the deputy mayor can let me know when it's appropriate to discuss it again, and we will. The only
And what we will do, sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, what I will make sure that we do is once the report is out for SPPC, I will forward it to Melissa so that she can circulate it to all the board members so that everybody can read it in advance of the committee meeting at council. So
That's great. We really appreciate that. Thanks to both of you for helping with us, and anything the mayor from Strathroy Middlesex can do on that, just in that area, or do you want to comment? Or
It took me a minute to kind of twig what Deputy Mayor was saying. We actually faced the same issue in Mount Bridges. We had a seniors building that had a mortgage up until, I believe, 4 years ago, that had RGI as part of the mortgage. Now I understand why the RGI is going away.
not great. Thanks for.
No, and I
explanation. I
understand
mean,
the conversation. It took me a minute to.
Yeah, it's very helpful to know, and it's very helpful to have elected members who are sort of advancing issues that we're interested in without obviously any promises of one result or another, but it's good to have sort of common ground on that. The last thing I just wanted to mention was I took a few hours to go to the Tenant Advisory Committee meeting I think it was on Tuesday in one of our buildings. Just so you're aware that the Tenant Advisory Committee is a committee that's been formed and is operating to bring tenants' concerns to the Tenant Advisory Committee. It was or the Tenant Services Committee. It was pretty interesting. It's 5 people. They're now sort of in the stages of sort of getting organized in terms of their governance. And like any committee that's forming, they want to move right to solutions before they sort of got all the groundwork in place, but there's staff there helping them, and there's Pillar is there helping them also. So I think they were appreciative that I was there, that I was spent some time with them. I think they're very serious about doing work, and I think what they're going to be looking for is working with us on things. For instance, they really want to do town hall meetings, and what we said to them was, if you want to come to the town hall meetings that we organize, maybe that's possible without doing it all sort of yourself. So I think I'll go visit them again when they moved a little bit forward, but it was really great to talk to them. I can tell you the concerns they express are similar to what the ones we're talking about than the concerns that we've expressed. So the one area they did express interest in that I don't know anything about, but I can talk to Paul about, was buildings used to be, according to them, there would be like seniors buildings, family buildings, and they seem to say that has gone away. So I just wonder, is that something that didn't work? Is it something that
So
We don't
there's a
do-
few things that happened. Some buildings were built as seniors and then the demand wasn't there. So we have one development at Tecumseh that was built in the sixties that was heralded as a great seniors building. So it's a cluster of 3 buildings, but a lot of the units are bachelor suites and studios. So over time, seniors weren't interested in that. We started building bigger senior buildings, mostly 1 bedroom. So that converted to adult. What I think we're hearing from them is for those seniors buildings that are still considered seniors, the age of the seniors is shifting. And sometimes people, and maybe Andrea will speak to that, and why the age went down and what's the relationship in these specific buildings where people with disabilities may be housed at a younger age.
Through the chair, we did see a shift in some of our seniors buildings. We had to reduce the age from the traditional 65 down to 60 or down to 55. Some of our buildings, similarly to the issues at Tecumseh, we had nobody on the wait list for a number of years that met the age parameters that were wanting to move into those sites. So we had to reduce that age, and then we partnered with the VON at our building 202 McNay. We have a certain number of units that are out of stock, and there's the tenants that are coming in to be supported by VON in those units do not have to meet the traditional age criteria. But I would suggest that those are not the units or the units of concern. Anyway, I think really it's more the younger seniors, the 55 plus at buildings like Walnut Street, I think is where, or Kent Street, where we might have seen some of, the little bit younger seniors that they're starting to see similar problems there that we see in the adult buildings, right?
Great.
With people coming through shelter.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm happy about 55 being a junior, senior,
either.
younger senior. I'm a little concerned about that comment, but I'll let it go.
That's for my own sake.
All right, I'll let that one go. Thank you. I think that's one thing. The other thing I just want to say, because we want some good news. They had high praise. Someone who's going into the buildings and helping to organize programs for them. There was a name that went through it that I don't remember.
Lisa and/or Carrie.
Carrie. And they had high praise for Carrie. And Carrie is someone I understand who was going into some of the buildings and actually setting up programs. So I think the one they were talking about was AA or for people who've had drug difficulties. They would actually have workshops and there was a lot of gratitude and really praise for that. So that's great. And I think it's important that occasionally we hear that we're doing a really good job. And so whoever Carrie is, she's doing a good job according to tenants. So I'll leave it there.
That's great.
Yeah. So with that, unless there's anything else, new business, I'll just ask someone to move adjournment. Moved by Shelley, seconded by the deputy mayor. Before we leave, thank you very much, everyone, for being so engaged. It's great to serve on this board. All in favor of adjournment? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
What, did you expect something bad? You look like you
No,
expected.
I like how you run meetings, Phil. I don't know.